Like, I literally cannot and will not understand where the audacity and this attitude comes from that, like, of course I'm allowed to speak with expertise and authority about this topic. Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for coming back if you've been here before, or hi, welcome if you're new. My name's Mickey. I'm a therapist, and we talk about therapist-y things on this channel. Today, we are talking about Girl Defined again, particularly Bethy, because there's an interview that went up with a clinical sexologist and his wife that's so incredibly problematic, and I want to talk about it because Bethany is right in the middle of trying to sell the ultimate sex course for married women, single women, probably for married women. And I want to talk about that, speak about that, educate around these issues as we do. But before we get into that, I want to give a very clear and loud trigger warning from the jump. This video is going to speak about CSA and just like general purity culture trauma. So if that is a soft spot for you, I will put a playlist up here of like fun, happy, fun times. Please protect yourself, take care of yourself, because we're going to talk about some stuff that's actually very disturbing today. Along with that, I also want to give a quick caveat that we give on all of these videos. We are talking about this subject specifically because religious fundamentalism and like regular Christianity are not the same. These people, particularly Girl Defined, but also other people in this niche, hide behind the excuse of being religious as an excuse to peddle advice that's not evidence-based, that's actively harmful, that does very detrimental damage to people's mental health, their physical health, their relationships, their well-being, and just like other things about being a human. And as a clinician, I don't feel good about just letting that advice live on the internet. So if you're a regular Christian, this is not about you. I have no beef with what anybody does with their own religion, but I do take beef with people peddling harmful advice and then hiding behind the excuse of being a Christian as if to say I'm allowed to say whatever I want, be free of the consequences, because that's not how it works. So that said, let's get into this interview. I also, to be clear, I don't have the full interview because Bethy's actually taken it down. And while I am usually good about downloading stuff when I clock that it's going to be problematic, when I watched this, I was like on my way out the door, so I didn't have a chance to. So we don't have the full interview today. We have like a compilation that somebody on the Fundy Snark Uncensored subreddit uploaded. I'm not going to put their username. I don't know if they want to be identified or not, actually, but shout out to them. Let's get into this video.
Y'all are an incredible couple, and I'm just excited for the entire Girl Defined community to get to know you. I hope that y'all become like the mentor couple of this community, because we need it, and we need godly marriages to look up to.
Well, we met at a summer Bible camp. Phyllis was 15, I was 16. I hit her in the head with a softball. She never recovered. She's been hilariously in love ever since.
Wow. So we wrote a lot of letters. And
you know what writing letters is? Actual letters.
Snail mail.
Yeah. Put a link in so that people can look that up.
Yeah, snail mail. And, we come from conservative Christian background, very much during a time when purity culture was all that was talked about. And so
is that different from now in your circle?
That was the only thing talked about. And so we kind of understood what not to do.
Dr. Glenn, how did you feel when you were going into marriage as a young man? Y'all were babies. I feel like I got married at 30, so I'm like, y'all were literally babies. But what was your mindset going into that?
We went into marriage thinking we're set up. We have nailed this. We love God with a passion. We were deeply involved in church and ministry. We read scripture all the time together. We prayed together continuously. So we knew that this was pretty much a slam dunk. We're on point, and it's going to be phenomenal. We were a little bit shocked that it didn't play out.
So you get
okay. Hold on. Before we go any further, I want to address this because while Paul and Morgan and Bethy and like Kristen to an extent, and like a lot of the people again in this niche have made this effort to distance themselves from purity culture and from this teaching that loving God, being a Christian is enough to provide you with all of the training, all the expertise, all the knowledge that you'd ever need to have a perfect marriage, happy sex life, perfect everything, really. They have tried to distance themselves from this message. This is still very much the vibe in this community, and this is why I take issue with this type of content being made, because while they may try to distance themselves from this by saying explicitly like, oh, and we know that being a good Christian doesn't mean that you have all the answers, they do still portray this in a lot of ways. There is an old video on my channel where Girl Defined did an interview with Allie Beth Stuckey about her dumb book, where they directly and indirectly shamed victims of abuse and people with mental illness for like not trying hard enough, not praying hard enough, like not being real Christians, like those kind of vibes, and like in essence imply that if you were a real Christian or you really loved God or you were praying hard enough or you were doing the work in like their religious circle, that you would not struggle with mental illness, with low self-esteem, with anxiety, with depression, with like any negative things apparently. While they do say this in like later interviews and like things that are more recent, I want to be super clear. First of all, Girl Defined has like a long and well-documented track record of peddling this belief, but also that they are explicitly saying we distance ourselves from this purely for the optics of this, and this is not actually reflective of a real change that's been made in their values and in the way that they portray content. If you go look at their Instagram, literally right now, they're still actively shaming and shameful and judgmental content that's being shared there. So I really want to encourage people, again, like this is one of those moments, I'm not under the impression that like most people who watch this video are waiting for a Girl Defined redemption arc, but like generally this is an important thing for us to be aware of in terms of content consumption on the internet, because people do this, right? It's not a secret that Bethy and Kristen make their living by making content online, and so they have a vested interest in protecting their reputations. That doesn't mean, though, that they are actually doing the things that they say that they're doing, or that they're actually doing any meaningful work to unlearn the problematic things that they've platformed in the past. So yes, while I think all of us are probably on the same page that Girl Defined's not scheduled for a redemption arc anytime soon, this also applies to other influencers and other people who have said or done problematic things in the past.
Get married, you go into your honeymoon, you have the slam dunk ready, which I can kind of relate to. That's kind of how I felt when I got married. Like, I have read the books, I've got this. Like, I am a pro.
With the whole idea of purity, that we thought our first sexual encounter would be spiritual, would be like beyond any joy experience in our lives. And it was really just the opposite for me. And
for me, it was the greatest 11 seconds of my life. So, and I was shocked at how ungrateful my new wife was.
First of all, I want to highlight the body language between these two at this moment in time, because to be clear, I'm not a body language analyst. That's not a specialty of mine. There is real training that you can take for that. I have not taken it. However, in my education to be a clinician, there is education about how to read nonverbal communication and things like that. And the discomfort, the fake laugh, the really tense facial expressions between these two, like this isn't actually funny. I don't think that she really enjoys this joke very much. Also, Bethy's like very exaggerated laughs and jokes and smiles don't read as authentic for what it's worth. But on top of that, this joke about like, ha ha ha, it was the greatest 11 seconds of my life, couldn't believe how ungrateful my new wife was, blah, blah, blah. This is what I'm fucking saying. This is what I'm talking about. This couple earlier, like literally 10 seconds ago, just tried to sort of indirectly imply just because you're a Christian and you may have done all of the right things doesn't mean you're going to have a great sex life. And so like, we should be working towards educating ourselves in order to have a good sex life, right? Like that's the implication of this whole interview. But then immediately that's followed by this very misogynistic and not funny joke about how I had no self-awareness about sexual pleasure or like even like just basic reciprocity here. And also I came into this relationship with such an entitlement that I felt that my partner, even though they received almost no sexual gratification and that this experience was probably like a little bit traumatizing given what we know about purity culture, I'm upset that they didn't fawn all over me after I provided them with no meaningful benefit in this situation. The fact that we're still making this joke to me indicates that there's still some level of this belief system that resides in this marriage, which is a problem. No person who's a clinical sexologist or a clinician or an educator or a provider around these issues should be making these fucking jokes. If you're a clinician, you're a therapist, you're a sex coach, you're like whatever, makes fucking jokes like this, run away. Run so fucking far away, because it's just not fucking funny. Joking about entitlement, a lack of pleasure, a lack of care or concern or compassion or respect in regards to your sexual relationship with your spouse, particularly at a very vulnerable time, isn't fucking funny. And it's really not a good look for someone who claims to be an expert and a provider in the field that I work in to be platforming this kind of rhetoric about relationships. It's gross, it's misogynistic, and it carries a lot of problematic values with it. And so like just generally I want to encourage people again to be like aware and like discerning. A lot of times in therapeutic relationships, folks will come in with this attitude that like the therapist or the clinician is the expert in the room and like they're right about everything. That's not true. Not all therapists are created equal. To be clear, this person, the husband in this couple, is a clinical sexologist and does have a master's degree, I believe. From what I've been able to find, that master's degree was procured through a religious institution or like a religiously leaning college. And that clinical sexology program has not been verified as like one of the more difficult programs to complete. In the same way that we talked about ACBC and how there are certificates that you can earn by attending like a couple of hours of fucking training. It seems like his clinical sexology license or certification or whatever came from a place of, similar reputation. And so again, this is just another reminder also that someone having alphabet soup at the end of their name doesn't mean dick all necessarily. I so seriously want to stress that you as the consumer of therapeutic and clinical services, first of all, you're the person who's in charge because you're paying for a service. But second of all, you are allowed to proceed with a little bit of skepticism and with like an attitude of authority that like just because you have these letters at the end of your name doesn't give you the authority to speak definitively about my life, to tell me what to do or to tell me that you're right and I'm wrong. And I want to be clear, this is not to say that you shouldn't trust therapists. The vast majority of therapists and professionals are well educated, are licensed, are safe people. But especially in this vein, if there's like a religious leaning, particularly a Christian leaning, this seems to be a problem in these circles, to just be aware of that and to feel empowered to say no to recommendations. If you have like family or friends that are pushing a person like this on you, please feel empowered to say no. And to just like know internally that again, just because someone has the letters doesn't mean that they actually know what they're talking about.
I was like, what? That was a big win. But I had no idea. Because, I mean, literally for me, we have penetration for the first time. And there you go. I ejaculated. And wow, what a huge win. And I did not know that my partner was like, wait, what?
Bullshit. This is the other thing that really fucking pushes my buttons about this, because there's this attitude that, oh, men are so silly and so dumb and so unaware, and that's just how men are. He didn't know. I find that incredibly fucking hard to believe. Any person who is engaged in any amount of physical contact with another person usually can glean some type of feedback, some type of awareness, some clue about whether the person enjoyed themselves, is enjoying this, finds this to be like fun, interesting, pleasurable, what have you. And I know that this will vary in terms of people's neurodivergence and for people who struggle with social cues and things like that. But I do just want to be super fucking clear that even in those situations, it is entirely possible to tell whether a person is enjoying themselves in company with you, and especially in a sexual situation. Like, there's never a good enough excuse when we're sharing a very vulnerable sexual or intimate experience with someone to just excuse yourself of the responsibility of being aware of whether or not your partner enjoyed themselves, or whether or not your partner feels safe or looks like they're not suffering. This just, it pushes my fucking buttons, because again, this, as a person who's like claims to be educated and a professional, he's actively platforming this idea that men are so dumb that they can't be held accountable for being aware whether or not their partner orgasmed, is enjoying themselves, felt seen, heard, valued in that scenario at all. And it's not their job. Apparently, it's not his job to know that. That's disgusting. That's disgusting. And it's like the opposite of everything that we know about an informed consent and like a conscientious effort to be a good and safe partner sexually. So like, just like, none of this is good. None of this is good.
Yeah.
That was the magic. Are you kidding me? I learned quite a bit about sex from my fellow third graders, and I found out that some of that information was inaccurate. Who knew? And I'd never told Phyllis that.
Why is that funny? Especially with the things that they're about to discuss in a minute. That's not fucking funny. I don't understand why all three of these people are laughing about this because it's not fucking funny to me, and it's certainly not funny to the fucking people who were sexually violated as children. Is that meant to be funny? Is that a joke? Because I must have missed it.
I knew everything about sex, but I hadn't told her that I didn't. And so she just assumed that, her guy's got it. He knows stuff, and I didn't at all. And we had never talked to anybody. You just didn't do that. That was not acceptable. You didn't talk about real things such as sex. The wedding night and the honeymoon was a disaster. And Phyllis figured out that, so we did a lot of water skiing on our honeymoon because Phyllis figured out if we're in a boat with other people, ain't none of that sex stuff happening. And I did not realize I'd married a water skiaholic. And
can we talk about the fact, like, Bethy thinks this is the funniest thing she's ever heard, and he actively just admitted with his full chest online that his wife scheduled them activities to avoid being intimate with him because she had such a bad time during sex that she was trying to hide from him. Like, hello? This is haunting. I don't understand why this is fucking funny, and I'm even more confused why anybody on God's green fucking earth would trust these people to give advice about sex or intimacy. It gets worse, though.
So literally, we'd have breakfast, and then I'd be like, "Hey, babe, you want to go back to the?"
Yeah.
Like, no, let's go water skiing. We'd come in for lunch, go right back out to the boat, and that's what we did our entire honeymoon. And of course, by the end of the day, Phyllis is exhausted. She's like, "Oh, babe, I'm just so tired." And I'm like, "Well, if we hadn't water skied so much, we wouldn't be so tired."
Neither of us were prepared for the disappointment, for the trauma. Like there was, for me, the whole experience, and I didn't have a voice. I didn't know how to communicate what was happening for me. And so I was just very quiet. And, water skiing felt safe. So and I knew how to water ski. So that was a comfortable place for me. Glenn he had booked this honeymoon place that was like an actual honeymoon resort. And everything was like red velvet and, mirrors everywhere. And I was just mortified because I wasn't comfortable with any of it. Like it just.
I wonder why. I wonder where that came from. It's a mystery why someone who grew up in a repressive, anti-sex environment wouldn't feel comfortable with their own body, let alone having another person be naked and intimate near them and with them. This is the thing that just pushes my fucking buttons, because Girl Define and Paul and Morgan are both doing this where they're trying to rebrand as like, we're sexually progressive, we love sex and talking about sex, and like, we don't value purity culture, we don't abide by purity culture, don't have sex before marriage, but we don't believe in purity. Like, hello? This is the same. Like, just because we've repackaged it and wrapped it up in a red velvet bow doesn't make this any less repressive or backwards or ill-informed. And it certainly doesn't make it less traumatizing for the people that are going to survive this. I feel like Bethy and Kristen and Paul and Morgan are both doing this like in a similar way that the diet culture rebranded itself as like wellness culture, or like, no, we promise we're not obsessed with restriction. We just really think that you should drink juice only, like exclusively. This is the same. We don't think that you should have repressive attitudes about sex. We just think that you should not have sex before marriage. Don't talk about sex. Don't masturbate. Don't learn about your own body. And then once you're married, 0 to 100, you should be the sexual being. You should be the most sexually evolved person overnight. Right? Not even like in a moment's notice after you've now signed a piece of paper and done the thing. Now it's better. This isn't any better. And I just really want to highlight how traumatizing this is for a person who doesn't even have a sense of safety or comfort to look at their own body. The expectation that you not only be naked and vulnerable in that way, but also that you allow someone to touch you, to be inside of you, and to be sexually intimate with you that you've never spent any time alone with is fucking wild. Like, this is so incredibly traumatizing. Like, cannot be stated enough how traumatizing of a shift this is for folks. And we know this. Like, there are so many people who've spoken out about how purity culture affected them and their self-esteem and their relationships and like the whole nine. And so, like, again, just because we're saying that this is different doesn't mean that it's actually different.
It went from 0 to 100 way too quickly for me. It didn't feel right, but I didn't know how to say that. And
maybe because these people did and actively still participate in a culture that robs women of their voices and their autonomy and their empowerment to speak for themselves, and the expectation is that I don't have to advocate for myself, my husband will do it for me, while also at the same time serving this messaging to men and young boys that you are the authority, you are the empowered one, you are the one who has power. It's not your job to think or care or consider the voice, needs, wants of the female partner that we're going to assign to you. Maybe that's the fucking problem. I don't know. Just a thought.
Know how to communicate my pain in it. Glenn was just so confused. And
but also, did he ask any questions? Do men in this culture get taught that if your partner's not having a good time, if your partner seems not excited, not enjoying themselves, like not in the same page, on the same page that you are, that you should carefully, kindly, compassionately host a conversation around this from a place of wanting to learn, from a place of wanting to understand, from a place of wanting to support? No, they fucking don't. And this is what I'm talking about. Just because we've got on a Zoom call and talked about how we think sex should be talked about more doesn't mean that we're unlearning the problematic underpinnings of this culture that creates this problem in the fucking first place. Bethy can yam on about sex on her Instagram all she fucking wants to, but it does not undo the problematic cultural ideals that she continues to peddle as part of her legalism view about religion. If you have these legalistic and repressive and misogynistic and patriarchal views about relationships and about people, this is going to be the byproduct. It does not matter how often Bethany talks about lingerie or sex toys, this is going to be the end result. And again, it drives me fucking nuts that we're doing this because it's so fucking disingenuous. I almost would prefer, honestly, the way that they were before, because at least it was like clear cut from the outside and like less insidious for the young people that are watching this content, because the young and impressionable and vulnerable people who are scared, who are overwhelmed, and who feel disempowered might stumble on this content and feel like, oh, I can love sex and I can feel empowered by sex. Maybe it doesn't have to be bad, and it's going to be bad again if we don't unlearn the problematic underpinnings in this culture. And so it feels even more predatory now than it did before.
So he experienced tons of pain on our honeymoon because of the way I was reacting to everything. And so we made a lot of bad conclusions. I mean,
I know I'm pausing every 5 seconds, but I also would just like to highlight that even now, again, as people who claim to be like on the other side of this issue, Phyllis is talking about how unfair it was for her to cause her husband emotional pain by being traumatized that he didn't kindly and compassionately explore their sexual intimacy instead of just like running headlong into the thing. This is what I'm talking about.
It didn't take long for us to actually just decide that I was broken. And
wow.
I accepted that. I'm like, yep, you're right. I'm one of those broken people who,
and broken because you say broken. What do you, yeah.
Because I was so sexually activated, which is the typical male, or the vast majority. It's not 100%, but it's pretty close. So I was sexually activated far more readily and far more frequently than she was.
Got it.
So obviously she was broken because she was never, I don't like to say never with human behavior, but she was never sexually activated. So obviously she's damaged, she's broken, and there's just something wrong with her. And again, I was not the voice saying that, but I didn't say otherwise.
I would just like to point out that this man, again, who is practicing, apparently, clinical sexologist, and is platforming himself as the expert in the room in this moment, actually just admitted that because he and his wife did not enjoy their sex life, the immediate conclusion, or the first logical conclusion that he came to was that it must be that his wife is broken. Oh, well, we'll just keep fucking. We'll just keep having sex. Sorry that you're broken, but come over here, though. Hello? That's fucking disgusting. And also, again, part of the fucking problem with this abusive and patriarchal and misogynistic community. This is not an okay thing to platform as an expectation in relationships. If one partner is experiencing pain, disempowerment, a lack of enjoyment, even just like a lack of enjoyment by itself, but all of these things combined, there's never a good enough reason to say, sorry that you're broken, we're still gonna have sex though. That's abusive. That's not okay. At the very least, it's incredibly fucking unkind and inconsiderate. At worst, this is actively abusive. And I do not understand why we're having this conversation as if this is just just a normal thing to disclose. This is perfectly fine to talk. Like, hello? No, it's fucking not.
And so we just kind of accepted, well, too bad.
We accepted it.
Woman happens to be broken, and this poor guy happens to be married to a broken woman.
I understood enough.
And Bethy laughs. She laughs. Like, this is funny. This is the person who's trying to sell you a $150 course about the ultimate sex course for married women. The person who hears about someone being sexually abused and laughs. Right. We're supposed to pay you our hard-earned money in this late-stage capitalist dystopian nightmare. For what? For this? Like, I'm just blown the fuck away that we're actually talking about this. We've admitted this openly, and that we're laughing about it. To be clear, this isn't fucking funny.
Enough to know that this was my duty. This was my wifely duty. So it didn't matter if I liked it or didn't like it, or that I felt pain. For me, it's like this is what marriage is now. Like, I would say all the fun we had dating all of a sudden didn't exist anymore. I was trying to survive, and I was trying to avoid as much as possible sex. And so I was always running. If you really dig into our story, you hear a lot about Glenn dealing with some psychological disorders, which neither of us understood or knew about. At that point in his life, he was scoring pretty high on obsessive compulsive disorder. And so patterns were hugely important to him, and a lot of pain when things weren't done, quote unquote, right.
Well,
and
God's way.
God's way.
Coincidentally was my way.
Right. Right. For me,
that's not funny. This is something we've talked about actually in a past video. I'll put it up here. Religious scrupulosity and religious themed obsessions and compulsions. In the research, we have like moderately robust research to support that this is actually a somewhat common, or like at least not uncommon phenomenon. And also why legalism, fundamentalism is so dangerous, because it can very much capitalize on whatever pre-existing risk factors exist for a person around OCD and catapult that into another fucking universe of severity. If you are a person who has symptoms similar to this, I do really want to encourage you to seek services or therapy or like involvement from a therapist or a clinician who's educated and trained in exposure response prevention, or ERP, or exposure ritual prevention is what it's also called. That's the gold standard treatment for OCD, and it can very much make a world of a difference in terms of life satisfaction and in terms of reducing the symptoms related with this. Also, I think it goes without saying, like, trigger warning moving forward, they're going to speak openly about OCD and things like that. And that might be triggering if you're struggling with this.
Me, I felt like I couldn't win. Sex was painful, as in emotionally painful. It was confusing for me. And then just the everyday things, like, you know, I would do the laundry, but I wouldn't fold things just right, or I wouldn't put them away just right. And so then Glenn would redo things.
She'd do the laundry, I'd come home and I'd redo it. Because
Right.
she didn't do it, you know, air quotes, she didn't do it correctly. And so I would redo everything. And for me, it was a very real pain point that the towels are not folded the same and they're not stacked up perfectly straight. She spent so much energy, it's just, you know, so much guilt, and that I brought that to her, which I didn't know what was happening with me either. I wasn't doing it to be cruel, but she spent so much energy trying to figure me out.
And, you know, we dated for 4 years, but we were not even in the same city until the end. But these were not things that I saw in our dating relationship. There was never a pattern like you got to do this way. That never came out. It was easier for me just to conclude, I'm broken, so sorry, buddy, that's what you got. And, you know, I did the mandatory number of times sex in a month, whatever that was, but there was not pleasure in it for me.
I'd also just like to highlight at this point, I think this compilation is not going to include the section that I want to talk about, so we're going to have to watch a different video in a sec. But I just want to highlight this before we wrap this particular section up, that even for folks who aren't consistently orgasming during sex, it's entirely possible for sex to still be enjoyable, to still be a moment of mutual connection, to still be like valuable shared intimacy. And the fact that she's speaking about sex in this way, that it was consistently painful, it was consistently confusing, emotionally overwhelming, potentially traumatizing, potentially like physically painful, is not a good sign about the amount of effort that her partner was putting in for this experience to be positive to her. I don't know this for certain, and so I want to be clear. Please don't run with this as like this is factual material. I don't know this, but to me, it does very much read as like you have decided, the male partner has decided that his wife is broken, and so therefore I don't need to try anymore. Therefore, there is no level of enjoyment that you can get from this, so I'm going to get mine. I'm done trying to care, trying to make this positive for you, trying to like understand you, care about you. I'm basically just here for me. And if it does improve ever, that's great. But otherwise, like, this is your duty. This is your job. And so I am sort of resigning myself to the fact that you will just be in pain for the rest of our lives, which again is horribly traumatizing and awful, but also not a fucking good look for somebody who claims to be an expert around the topic of sex and intimacy. These people say that the first like years, I think, of their marriage were awful. Their sex life was awful for like years. So I'm just not buying the like, we had an awakening and now I'm teaching other people about sex thing. No. I am very happy to provide people the space and the time and forgiveness and like deference that they need in terms of recovering from purity culture, because lots of people go through this. And I want to be super clear. If you are a person who experienced these things, this is not about you specifically. It is very much okay for people to take their time to deconstruct, to unlearn, and to do the work around that, because purity culture harms everybody who's involved with it. But this attitude that like, not only are we still conservative Christians and we still prescribe this advice to people, albeit maybe slightly different, and that, you know, this works for us, but also that these people just like full committed to being miserable for years, that their life is better now, and therefore we're equipped to give advice. No, hard pass. That's not how it fucking works. Let's find this other video real quick so that we can talk about the worst and most traumatizing section of this. Okay, I found this video. Again, I'm so sorry. We have to piecemeal this out because Bethy privated the video. Probably because they received a lot of feedback about how absolutely fucking horrifying this interview was. This is on a YouTube channel called The David Pakman Show. I cannot personally vouch for the credentials or safety of this account, to be clear, but we're just using this to watch this video. So let's watch some more of this. Again, trigger warning, because we're going to talk about CSA and like other consent violations in a sec.
Like, I didn't even think that was a weird sentence, but she said, okay, what, can you define broken? What are you saying? What does that mean? And then I just said, oh, well, I don't have a clitoris. Because at this point, Glenn had read enough to know that a clitoris was involved.
First of all, again, the fact that Bethy's laughing about this is wild to me. But second of all, for some context, this couple as adults went to a dinner party, and apparently a friend asked about their sex life. I'm not sure how that conversation came up, but they're speaking to this female friend about their lack of enjoyment, particularly Phyllis's lack of enjoyment in their sex life, and then saying she doesn't have a clitoris.
That mattered, and that had to do with an orgasm. And it's like, I've never orgasmed, and there's no pleasure. I don't enjoy it. Matter of fact, I hate it. Wow. I just endure it. We just get through it as fast as possible. And so,
Again, I just want to highlight that, first of all, for folks with clitorises, orgasming can be more complicated. It certainly doesn't have to be, especially what we know about the statistics of WLW relationships, or at least relationships between two people who both possess a clitoris, that the amount of orgasms had in those relationships far exceeds those between folks that have like cis-het relationships between a man and a woman. However, orgasming with the clitoris can be somewhat more complicated. And so it's perfectly normal. If you don't orgasm every single time that you have sex with someone, that's something that we should also normalize. But to say, I have no pleasure, I have no enjoyment from this, and actually I hate sex, and the fact that she felt comfortable enough to admit this out loud in front of her husband and this friend says a lot to me about how normalized this had become in their relationship. This was not a thing that she was hiding from him. The fact that she hated being intimate with him was not something that was news to him or surprise to him. And again, I just really want to highlight the fact that he had resigned himself to saying, my life partner doesn't enjoy sex. My life partner hates when I'm intimate with them, and yet I'm going to continue to do it anyways. This is an act of sexual violence. This is an act of sexual coercion. This is not okay. To normalize this attitude in a sexual relationship is so horrifying. And again, this is not a person that anyone should be taking clinical advice from about sex or relationships, because if this was his attitude in his relationship for years, apparently, that's a fucking problem. I would be willing to bet big money that this man did not unlearn the problematic underpinnings that caused him to be resigned and perfectly okay with his life partner hating being intimate with him for that many years before he decided to become a sex therapist or a sexologist. This is a fucking issue.
Yeah, we shared that openly. And she was in the medical field. And she was like, okay, well, what do you mean you don't have a clitoris?
And our friend, after a bit, said, I just feel like taking Phyllis in the back room and showing her what I'm talking about. Well, Phyllis started to stand up. And then this other woman said, but I can't do that.
Before we move forward, again, I just want to give a trigger warning because it's about to get disturbing, more so than it already is. But also on top of that, I just want to highlight the fact that her husband knew that a clitoris was involved in sexual intimacy, but couldn't find it. I know that this is a joke. I know that this is a meme, particularly in cishet relationships. Like, I get that, but it's, first of all, it's not fucking funny. And second of all, the fact that this man, I don't know at what point in his education he was when this occurred, but the fact that this man was aware that a clitoris was involved and did, I'm assuming, almost no cursory investigating. Like, listen, I know, again, that this is like a meme, this is a joke in cishet relationships that men can't find the clit, whatever. First of all, I want to highlight that it's really not that difficult. If we do some like really basic exploration of anatomy, like the clitoris is located on the external, it's located in the vulva, like it's external on a person's body. And so if we're doing any amount of exploring or like kind and compassionate discovery together, this is something that can be sussed out relatively easily. This is also something that if Phyllis had not grown up in this repressive and shameful environment, she could have very much discovered on her own through safe and slow personal sexual exploration. This is also something that she could have figured out if she felt safe and comfortable and empowered to like even just peer at her own genitals with a mirror or something like that. There are so many steps up to this point, like medical diagrams, Googling this, going to a library, asking your mom, asking a friend. Like there are like 76,000 fucking steps before we get to the place where we've resigned ourselves to believing that you don't possess a clitoris. And I just, again, this is not to shame them because their experience and their attitudes about this are very much reflective of purity culture and the way that this culture educates people and shames people. And so I don't want to throw the book at them necessarily for having this personal experience, but I am very much going to throw the fucking book at them for platforming this as if this is a thing that's perfectly normal and then also provides us with the expertise to speak definitively and prescriptively to other vulnerable people about their fucking sex lives. Hard pass. That's not how it fucking works. But also, again, is just really a window into how this culture treats and views, particularly women, but like people generally. This is so dehumanizing and demeaning and disgusting and disempowering. I like can't get over how calm everyone in this conversation is. Just talking about the blatant and aggressive dehumanization of this woman as if she exists to be an orifice for her husband, even if she hates it. Like, I don't even know what to say.
Oldest child had been born, which is a little girl. And eventually, Phyllis was changing our daughter's diaper, and our friend showed her on our little girl, where the clitoris is located, which...
This is... I just want to highlight, first of all, before this admission was made, we recounted a scenario in which the friend said, I wish I could take Phyllis into the other room and show to her what a clitoris is, but I could never do that. The implication being that that's so improper, that's so inappropriate, that's crossing a line. I could never do that. So we didn't do that, right? But for some reason, it's perfectly okay to violate the privacy of an infant to show them about where her own genitals were. When people talk about CSA existing in religious communities, this is what we're fucking talking about. And I want to be clear. I'm not alleging or insisting that these people violated this child with like malicious sexual intent, but this is still very much a violation of this child's privacy and this child's body to use it as an anatomy tool, but also to educate about their parents' sexual well-being. This is something that could have so easily been done. Again, this is why I highlighted how many fucking steps there are before we get to this fucking place. There are like 3 billion fucking resources that I could suggest to someone about how to discover their own anatomy, their own sexual pleasure. And I want to be super clear. I know this because this is actual fucking work that I've done as a clinician with people who have left and deconstructed from purity culture. I'm well fucking aware of how to educate people about how to safely, respectfully, and kindly and compassionately discover their own bodies, themselves, their sexuality, and how to heal from the shame that they've encountered in this culture because I've done it. And I didn't have to do it by violating anybody's sexual or physical bodily autonomy. This is fucking disgusting. Like, I literally have goosebumps. I'm so fucking mad right now. I cannot and will not understand that these people claim to be the moral high ground, these people who claim to have the capital T truth about the way that humans are supposed to behave themselves, and also actively participate in leveraging legislation that takes away the fucking human rights of people like me, of people in our community, of people who are safe and kind and respectful. They are happy to participate in the dehumanization and removing the constitutional rights of people like me because we're a threat to children, but then actively fucking admit to violating small children on the internet. Like, I literally cannot and will not understand where the audacity and this attitude comes from that, like, of course I'm allowed to speak with expertise and authority about this topic, because this is what I'm fucking talking about, and this is why we continue to make the content that we make, because I, as a clinician, like, I just can't sit by and like allow this to exist on the internet without somebody talking about how fucking absurd this is, especially because all 3 people in this conversation had this talk, we filmed this talk, we edited this talk, we uploaded this talk, and I guarantee you all of the people involved in the publishing of this content signed off on this being published on the fucking internet. These people were perfectly happy and very comfortable admitting this on the internet and publishing it for all of the fucking world to see. They didn't see any problem with this. That's a fucking issue. Like, that's wild to me that this is just another Wednesday for Bethany Beal. This is just another interview for Dr. Glenn and Phyllis. Hello? Like, I just don't. I'm like so overwhelmed and disappointed with how little awareness these people have for how critical it is to respect and care for the bodily autonomy of everybody, but especially of small children who you are their caregiver. It is your job to safeguard them against things that are traumatizing. And I want to be clear. I know that a lot of people are probably going to say they were a baby, they didn't know anything, it wasn't like that. But what we know about trauma is that pre-verbal trauma is very much a thing that exists. It is entirely possible for a person to be traumatized by having adverse experiences in childhood before you had the ability to like remember things. Just because you witness something as a child doesn't mean, or like a baby doesn't mean that it doesn't go on to have effects on your nervous system and the way that you interact in life. And if anything, sometimes that makes it more difficult to recover from, because you don't know where it came from, because you don't have like a clear incident that you can point to as being the source of the trauma. And so I want to be clear. Don't fucking do this with your kids. Don't fucking use your children as an anatomy doll. Fucking Google it. Go to the fucking library. Ask your pastor, your mom, your sister, your friend, your cousin, your dinner party buddy. Ask any fucking buddy else besides violating the privacy of your small children. I don't think that needs to be said, but apparently it fucking does.
It was huge information for Phyllis. And again, it's stunning to me. That's pretty darn basic.
That's all the footage that I have. So let's gooch this and unpack a little. But no, for sure, drag queens are assaulting children. Queer people are the dangerous ones. Okay, I want to be super clear. Again, for people who have deconstructed and left purity culture, I'm not unaware that people will have some of these views and issues to work out on their own time. And I want this channel to be a safe space for that. I want everyone to know that unpacking these values and like carrying these values from this culture is not a shameful experience. This is not something that you need to be embarrassed or shamed about, especially because a lot of the way that this culture works is by indoctrinating for folks before they have the chance to think or advocate for themselves. And so just possessing these views and having to unlearn them does not make you a bad person. The reason that this is so insidious and harmful and problematic is because, first of all, these people are aware that these views are problematic because they've negatively affected their own lives, and yet they're continuing to peddle them and platform them and speak prescriptively or to prescribe them to people as, again, the capital T truth, but also because these people have positioned themselves as experts on the basis of their negative experiences with these views. And so, again, we had this negative experience. We've decided that we are now experts because we've been through some shit. And so, therefore, we're going to give people advice about this. And that advice also just happens to be the things that caused us harm in our relationship. That's not cute. Like, that's not funny or a normal fucking thing to talk about. And it also is a fucking huge red flag as far as a clinician or a therapist or a professional is concerned. The other thing about this that I just want to highlight is that Bethy is like really doing the most to peddle her course about sexual wellness or awakening or something. And it includes a module from these people, these fucking people. It also includes a module from Morgan of Paul and Morgan, who literally a few days ago just said that if their child had premarital sex that they'd kick their kid out of their house at the age of 16. It also includes interviews from lots of other problematic people. And so I want to be clear, I'm not under the impression that anybody who's watching this video or has made it this far is actually going to buy that course. But like, first of all, don't. But on top of that, I know that folks do have the tendency to like hate watch this content or like subscribe so that you can like be aware of it and snark on it and stuff like that. Please don't do that. Like, please don't buy the course for like jokes or ha-has. Please don't subscribe to their channel. Please don't dislike their content even. Don't leave hate comments. Engaging with the content only informs the algorithm that, first of all, it's what you want to see, and so it will continue to show you more of it. But second of all, that there are people engaging and valuing this content. Engagement is what gets people more views, more clicks, more subscribers, more sponsorship deals, more money. And so please don't do that. Please don't participate in platforming this advice. This is, again, also why I make the content that I make, so that I can disperse it in a way that y'all can be aware of what's going on, that we can talk about what's going on, that we can create a community for deconstruction and safety and educating without directly contributing to platforming and like giving them like essentially like a digital thumbs up on their content. I think it goes without saying that religious counseling, we've talked about ACBC before, I'll put that up here, but like religiously oriented counseling is a very slippery slope. Although I do want to be super clear, there are very much educated, licensed, safe, valuable clinicians who are religious and who can provide you with meaningful and evidence-based treatment and also speak to or like directly interact with your religious beliefs in a safe way. Please don't fall for the myth that these people are the only types of religious counselors that exist. It's entirely possible to be a Christian counselor, religious counselor, spiritual counselor, and be a safe person, be a kind person, be a progressive person, be a respectful person, and also be like a safe and educated clinician who uses evidence-based practice. I think that's it. I'm exhausted by this. I am overwhelmed, and I am going to put a playlist up here also that's like fun, happy, fun times. It's a nice eye bleach for this. Please, if you are a person who has deconstructed from this or has been personally affected or traumatized by purity culture, by religion, take care of yourself, be kind to yourself. Doing this work is overwhelming and it can be traumatizing and sometimes re-traumatizing, but it is very much figure-outable. There is very much like real meaningful work that can be done here. And just please know that you are like so valued and so seen, and like your safety matters, what you want and what you need, and feeling valued matters. And there are very much clinicians who can help you do that and learn that and unlearn other stuff. As always, there's links in the description to find therapists if you want or need them, including links to sources that are aimed at being accessible and affordable. So please check those out if you haven't and if you need them. Okay, that's it. If you like the video, subscribe to the channel. We do talk about stuff like this, and sometimes we do lighter, fun pop culture moments, so I'd love to have you stay for that. And share the video, help the channel grow, and help each other grow. And I will see you guys next Saturday. Bye.